Saturday Night Shame, a confession from the convenience store. It's Saturday night in Los Angeles, and the city is electric with life. The streets are teeming with people dressed up, laughter bouncing off the walls of packed restaurants, conversations rising above the thump of bass from distant clubs. The warm, hazy night air carries with it a hint of salt from the beach, blending with the gritty sense of exhaust, hot food from street vendors, and faint traces of perfume. People rush by, groups of friends and couples arm in arm, ready to seize the night with wild abandon. But for me, Saturday night has turned into something else, something far darker, a ritual that I both loathe and dread. My nights have stopped being about freedom and choices. Instead, they revolve around a small, dingy convenience store that has become the unexpected stage for my weekly humiliation. The store sits in a nondescript strip of shops, squeezed between a rundown liquor store and an old laundromat. This isn't the kind of place you'd notice if you were just passing through. The windows are grimy, the faded signs above barely visible under the flickering fluorescent lights. It's an odd contrast to the trendy bars and neon-lit clubs just a few blocks away, like a forgotten relic from a different time. Inside, the aisles are cramped, stocked with random assortments of essentials and dusty items that look like they've been sitting there for years. This place isn't glamorous, it's anonymous, and that's exactly why I come here. In this small, forgotten corner of LA, I can pretend to be invisible, slipping in and out with no questions asked. Or so I thought. Every Saturday, like clockwork, I find myself here. And every Saturday, she's there, perched behind the counter with a look that mixes boredom and faint amusement. She's young, probably in her mid-20s, with dark hair thrown up in a messy bun and tattoos that snake down her arms. Tonight, she's wearing a vintage band tee that's faded and stretched out, making her look like a character from a music video that would have been shot on the streets of LA back in the 90s. She leans against the counter with an air of practiced indifference, scrolling on her phone with one hand and twirling a strand of hair with the other. But the moment I step in, she glances up, her expression shifting in a flash of recognition. There's something unsettling in the way her eyes light up when she sees me, a little too knowing, a little too entertained. I wonder sometimes if she's been waiting for me, expecting me. After all, I've become a regular fixture in her Saturday nights too. I walk through the narrow aisles, my footsteps slow and deliberate, heading straight to the familiar shelf. It's become such a strange ritual, one that feels almost surreal. I grab the items I came for, 2 Magnum condoms and a small bottle of lube, and set them down on the counter with a faint hesitation, as if that momentary pause might somehow soften the impact of what I'm about to do. She arches an eyebrow, her smirk deepening as she scans my purchases. Her eyes flicker with an amused glint as she looks up at me, that smirk practically taunting. "Big night, huh?" she says, her tone dripping with playful sarcasm. I force a smile, trying to laugh it off, but it feels hollow. Her words sting more than they should, each time a little sharper, cutting into the small shreds of pride I have left. This little exchange, this sad parody of flirtation, has become a part of my Saturday routine, a twisted kind of validation that only makes me feel worse. Part of me wants to believe she's actually interested, that maybe she's teasing me out of genuine curiosity. But deep down, I know better. I know she sees me for what I am, and that knowledge makes the whole ritual sting even more. Still, I play along, pretending this is just another errand, that I'm just another customer. But her eyes say otherwise. Her eyes tell me she's pieced together more of my story than I'd like to admit. Tonight, though, my fragile sense of control is shattered in an instant. Just as I'm about to pull out my wallet, the door opens behind me with the familiar chime of the bell, and the air shifts. It's a sound I've heard countless times, but this time, it freezes me in place. My breath catches, and my heart pounds with a sudden, raw dread. I don't even have to turn around to know who it is. He's here. He's never come here before. He's always left this errand to me, a task that was mine alone to carry out, like some small semblance of control he allowed me to have. But tonight, he's decided to break that unspoken agreement. Tonight, he's here to claim more than just my pride, he's here to make a statement. I can feel his presence behind me, a suffocating weight that I can't escape. The woman behind the counter, who's usually so relaxed, now stands a little straighter, her expression flickering with a mix of curiosity and caution as she takes in the sudden tension in the air. I finally muster the courage to turn around, and there he is. Tall, lean, and sharply dressed, he looks completely out of place in this dingy store, as if he's walked off the set of a high-end fashion shoot and accidentally stumbled into the wrong part of town. His dark jacket hugs his frame, and there's a smug smile on his face that makes my stomach churn. He holds up my phone, dangling it casually like a prize he's brought to taunt me. "You forgot this," he says, his voice low and smooth, dripping with a condescension that only amplifies my shame. His tone isn't loud, but it's piercing, cutting through the silence of the store and hanging in the air like a challenge. The cashier's eyes widen slightly, her gaze darting between us as if she stumbled upon something she shouldn't have, but her curiosity is palpable. I can see the questions forming in her mind, the faint smirk tugging at her lips as she watches this bizarre scene unfold. I swallow, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, thanks. Did you need anything else?" The words come out more strained than I'd like, and I can feel my face burning under his gaze. He just stands there, watching me with a cold, unblinking intensity, as if he's savoring the moment, drawing it out as long as possible. The cashier shifts uncomfortably, clearly intrigued, but sensing that this situation has veered into uncomfortable territory. He finally chuckles, low and mocking, and his gaze flickers to the cooler nearby. He grabs a bottle of orange juice, rolling it between his fingers as he turns back to me, his smirk widening. "Actually, yeah," he says, his voice louder now, echoing slightly in the small space. "I could use something to keep up my energy. Stamina's important, you know?" He places the bottle on the counter next to my items, his fingers lingering on it as if he's marking his territory. The words are a deliberate jab, casual yet loaded, a cruel reminder of the role I play in this twisted dynamic. The cashier's gaze sharpens, her amusement fading into discomfort as she pieces together the implication behind his words. I can see the pity in her eyes now, that faint flicker of sympathy mingled with disgust. And then, he delivers the final blow, his voice dropping to a near whisper, though loud enough for the cashier to hear. "Why don't you go get her ready for me? I'll be here, having a little chat with our lovely friend." He gestures towards the cashier with a smirk, and I feel my stomach drop. His words are a knife twisting deeper into my pride, a final reminder that I have no power here. I'm nothing more than a bystander in my own life, a participant in this sick game he's orchestrated. His gaze locks onto mine, cold and unyielding, and I feel my resolve crumble. The cashier shifts uncomfortably, her face a mixture of shock and sympathy as she tries to make sense of the scene before her. I turn away, my face burning with shame as I stumble out of the store. The sounds of laughter and distant music filter through the air as I step into the night, but they feel hollow now, mocking echoes of the life I once thought I had. The city that felt so alive just moments ago now seems vast and empty, each neon light casting a harsh glare on the cracks in my facade. I don't even know who I am anymore. My identity feels like a hollow shell, something I left behind in that store, scattered in pieces across the dirty linoleum floor. As I reach my car, I pause, taking one last look back at the convenience store. Through the dusty window, I see him leaning casually against the counter, chatting with the cashier, his smirk still firmly in place. She laughs, a forced sound that echoes in the silence, and I realize she's probably already dismissed me, turned me into a story she'll tell her friends later. The sad, humiliated man who buys condoms for another man's night with his own wife. I turn back to the car, gripping the steering wheel as I slide into the driver's seat. My mind races, thoughts colliding as I try to make sense of the twisted reality I've willingly, helplessly, surrendered myself to. The sound of the city fades into a distant hum as I sit there, drowning in the weight of my choices. How did I end up here, in this hollow life, stripped of every ounce of dignity, carrying out the bidding of a man who seems to take pleasure in reminding me how little I matter? I look out the windshield, catching a glimpse of my reflection in the rearview mirror. I barely recognize the person staring back at me, a man whose eyes have lost their spark, a man who wears the mask of indifference to hide the shame that's become his shadow. It's a face that has grown used to humiliation, a face that no longer holds the faintest trace of defiance. A memory flickers, hazy but persistent, of a time when I used to walk these same streets with confidence, back when my life was still mine. I remember feeling alive, ambitious, like I had a purpose. Those days feel like a distant dream now, a version of me that might as well belong to someone else. I had a career, goals, and dreams that stretched far beyond the boundaries of this sad little corner store and the man who now holds the reins to my life. I close my eyes, trying to suppress the anger boiling within me. It's a bitter mix of resentment and self-loathing, directed at him, yes, but mostly at myself. Because I know, deep down, that I allowed this to happen. I let myself become a supporting character in my own life, a passive participant in a story that's spiraling out of control. How many times did I brush off that nagging feeling, convincing myself that this was temporary, that I could regain control if I really wanted to? But each time, I found myself slipping further down, entangled in a web of humiliation and shame that's now become too familiar, too comfortable to break free from. I can't bear to go home just yet. The thought of facing my wife, knowing what's about to unfold in that house tonight, fills me with a sense of dread that makes my stomach turn. I can already picture it, her getting ready, anticipation in her eyes that used to be reserved for me, now directed at him. I know that when I walk through that door, I'll be greeted with a hollow exchange, a wordless understanding that I'm nothing more than an afterthought in this twisted triangle. The car feels like a prison, trapping me with my thoughts and regrets, so I turn the ignition and drive aimlessly through the city. The lights blur around me as I pass through familiar streets, the sights of LA that once filled me with excitement now taunting me with memories of who I used to be. I wonder how many people out there, moving through their own routines, feel as lost as I do. How many are living lives they no longer recognize, trapped in roles they never wanted to play? After what feels like hours, I find myself parked along the beachfront. The ocean stretches out before me, vast and dark, the waves crashing rhythmically against the shore. There's something comforting in the endlessness of it, a reminder that, somewhere beyond this moment, life goes on. But even as I stare into the horizon, I can't shake the feeling of being adrift, a tiny, insignificant speck lost in an ocean of choices I can no longer control. A part of me wants to keep driving, to leave this life behind and disappear into the anonymity of a new city, a new beginning. But even as I entertain the thought, I know it's a fantasy. Running won't erase the shame, it won't undo the choices that brought me here. I'll still be that same man, haunted by the same regrets, chained to the same humiliations. The hours slip by as I sit there, lost in thought, the sky gradually lightening as dawn approaches. It's almost morning now, and the city is waking up, unaware of the private hell I've been living. I know I can't avoid going home any longer. I don't have the luxury of escape. My place in this twisted arrangement awaits me, and I know that, for better or worse, I'll play my part, just like I do every Saturday night. But as I turn the car around and make my way back, a small flicker of defiance stirs within me. It's faint, barely a whisper beneath the layers of shame and defeat, but it's there, a stubborn spark that refuses to be completely extinguished. For the first time in a long time, I find myself wondering if there's a way out, if I can somehow reclaim the life I've lost. The thought is terrifying, and the path uncertain, but as I drive toward home, that tiny spark of hope gives me a reason to keep going, even if it's just for one more day.